Good morning and welcome to our most recent winter webinar series, the Propane Applications for Your Fleet. My name is Catherine Yoder with South Shore Clean Cities, and I'd like to thank everybody for attending today and to our speakers for their insight into the propane industry. The Lake Michigan Consortium consists of 3 coalitions: Wisconsin Clean Cities, Chicago Clean Cities, and South Shore Clean Cities. Our goal is to provide our 3 stakeholders with networking, training, and grant opportunities to enhance fleet performances and reduce emissions while working to leverage our strengths and create opportunities. Be sure to visit our website for upcoming events, webinars, and funding opportunities. I would like to introduce our speakers to today's webinar. Michael Taylor, with the Director of Autogas Business Development with the Propane Education and Research Council. Chelsea Uphaus, the Marketing Manager with ROUSH CleanTech. Matt Lomas, the Transportation Account Manager with McCallister Transportation. And Jason Ebert, the Vice President of Fleets and Facilities with Go Riteway Transportation. All attendees are in listen-only mode, and this webinar will be recorded. If you have any questions during today's presentation, please type them in the question box and we will get to them at the end of each presentation. Thank you again, and Michael, you can go ahead with your presentation once I get it up.
Thank you, Catherine. I appreciate that introduction and the opportunity to share the propane autogas story today. Thank you to all of those who are joining us on the webinar today. Propane autogas, propane, LPG were known by a lot of names, but regardless of the chosen name, we are the most popular alternative fuel in the world today. According to the World LP Gas Association, they estimate almost 27 million vehicles are operating globally on our fuel. In the United States, we have over 220,000 vehicles, and that number is growing in class 1 through 7 operations. And today you'll hear from other panelists that share their experiences with propane autogas. And it is worth noting that propane autogas is a very clean fuel with the best overall life cycle cost. When you're comparing total cost of ownership, and I'll get into this a little bit deeper in a few slides, but when you do an analysis based on total cost of ownership from the time you purchase an asset until you retire it, we are seeing savings for fleets of all types throughout the country, which makes propane autogas a clean fuel at the best overall cost. Okay. Catherine, we're not transitioning. For some reason, mine's not working. Oops. Catherine, are you with me?
Yes, I'll forward it for you.
Thank you so much. Can we back up one slide to the Propane Education Research Council? Some joining us today may not know who PERC is. Next slide. The Propane Education Research Council, our acronym is PERC. Well, we're not a government agency. PERC is a very unique nonprofit organization. We're a checkoff program that was authorized by the PURE Act in 1996 and amended again in 2014. Propane is unique, and in that PERC is unique in that it's established, operated, and funded solely by the propane industry. Our core areas of focus are education, safety and training, and research and development. And we invest our assessment dollars in state-of-the-art technologies that consume propane and provide a return on investment for the industry. And we have invested in all major school bus OEMs. So all the vehicles that are shown here today, we have a vested interest in those. In the research and development, certification, and commercialization of those projects. ROUSH CleanTech, their Ford vehicles, and numerous aftermarket systems. So why are people choosing propane autogas? It's domestic, portable, and clean. We have the most affordable infrastructure, reliable performance regardless of the weather, but we love winter, so that gives us an edge over especially diesel. We have the lowest total cost of ownership, and we are a proven technology. Next slide, please. 98% of the propane used in the U.S. today is produced in North America. In 2008, the U.S. was, go back one slide, the U.S. was a net importer of propane, with a large amount of that coming outside of the country. But thanks to fracking, the U.S. became a net exporter of propane in 2013, and we will export approximately 12 billion gallons this year. So we need to have, we have an overabundance of the fuel, and we need to create technologies that will keep our fuel here on U.S. soil. Also, propane is a clean fuel in its natural state. While autogas is true, we are a fossil fuel. We are the cleanest alternative fuel that is available today. Unlike our fossil fuel cousins, gasoline and diesel, propane is a clean fuel that dramatically reduces or eliminates all concerns about fuel storage and handling. In its natural state, propane is non-toxic and does not contaminate air, soil, and water resources. Drivers like it because they don't wear the smell of the fuel home after their routes, or on their routes during the day, or on their way home after the route is completed. Propane is difficult to spill because of our closed-loop pressurized system, so leaks rarely happen. And even if you do encounter a spill or a leak, cleanup is minimal and there are no hazmat bills to pay. Next slide, please. According to A-Fleet, and we use the 2016 A-Fleet data, you can compare the emissions reductions to the tailpipe on light-duty trucks. NOx, which is the primary contributor that needs to be eliminated with the Volkswagen settlement, you can see here that we're 36% less NOx and 6% less than gasoline. And greenhouse gases, propane produces 12% less than that fuel. Next slide. And when we're comparing medium-duty trucks, this is based on industry data, looking at the 0.2 grams per brake horsepower NOx levels. And Chelsea Uphaus will tell you about this. The ROUSH engine that we have today is certified at 0.05, which is 75%, produces 75% less NOx than diesel and 12% less greenhouse gases. Next slide, please. Regarding affordable infrastructure, propane, as we mentioned earlier, it's non-toxic, non-contaminant, basically eliminates all of your EPA concerns with fuel storage and handling. And the cost to actually transition into a fleet, hopefully you'll hear this story from the users, but it's very simple transition, and we've got lots of fleets out there that tell that story. Next slide, please. The infrastructure is very similar to propane, or excuse me, gasoline and diesel. In 2017, there were major improvements introduced, especially in the dispensers and nozzles. Mass flow technology is reducing the number of parts, improving performance, and providing the fuel management technology is required by most fleets. The dispenser pictured here is available from Superior Energy Systems. And the K15 Quick Connect nozzle, affectionately referred to as the granny nozzle in the right-hand photo, is revolutionizing the refueling experience for propane. It's lightweight, secure lock bayonet style, locks securely in place during refueling, and almost virtually eliminates evaporative emissions. So it's half the weight of our the Acme nozzle, and actually you can use it with one hand. So when we do it, next slide, please. Next slide. So when we compare it, when you compare gasoline and diesel to the propane refueling nozzles, you'll see that there's dramatic differences in these products. Next click, please. Diesel and gasoline nozzles are open, easy to spill, and do not control evaporative emissions during refueling. The K15 is a secure lock which eliminates fuel spills, emissions, and the fuel smell outside of the nozzle. So safe refueling, propane can do that. Next slide, please. Reliable performance. As I mentioned earlier, diesels do not like winter. Propane loves winter. And our performance is actually converting fleets every day of the week. The fact that you can start our vehicles quickly in the morning, produce consistent cabin heat, is attracting a lot of people, especially a lot of fleets, especially in school transportation. Next slide, please. In school transportation, student and driver safety is a top priority, and propane is resolving performance issues that plague fleets of all types. Diesels are hard to crank when it's cold, and they can require block heaters and fuel conditioners to operate during winter weather. Propane starts when it's cold. Quick starts eliminate the need for an early start crew, reduces labor and wages, especially during cold weather. We warm up quickly, produce consistent cabin heat, and ensures the students and the drivers stay warm and safe. Exterior visibility is improved as the heat keeps the windows clear of snow and ice, allowing the driver to identify potential threats both inside and outside of the bus. So reliable, safe performance, propane can do that. Let's take a look at some of the stats. Next slide, please. Today in the United States, if we go back about roughly 7 years, there were less than 2,000 school buses in operation, propane school buses. Today we have 14,000, I've got 14,000 plus here, but it's actually, we're approaching 14,700, transporting 850,000 students to over 830 school districts in 48 states. We're only missing 2 states. So if you look at the annual savings of about $1,500 per vehicle, multiply that out by the 14,000 school buses, you'll come up with $22 million in annual savings. Next slide, please. Total cost of ownership. Some of you may know it as vehicle life cycle cost analysis. This is becoming quite popular today. As more companies are looking at sustainability departments, more companies are looking at transitioning to alternative fuel vehicles. And when you're looking at conventional fuels today, you have to be very careful because low price today does not mean low cost over the life cycle of the vehicle. Next slide. If you do a complete life cycle analysis and look at all of the costs from the time you spec a vehicle until you retire it, you will see that propane autogas comes out ahead of all of the other fuels. If you do nothing else but compare the 3S, the fuel, the filters, and fluids, basically your preventative maintenance, over the life cycle of the vehicle, propane costs are less than our competitors. When you throw in unexpected repairs, labor and wages, fuel handling and storage, garage and facilities, propane does not require any major modifications in your garages or repair facilities, and no segregation of major and minor repairs. And our, as I mentioned earlier, refueling infrastructure is very affordable. Next slide. Propane is a proven technology. It's nothing new. We've been around since 1975, Northside ISD, along with Swan's Foods, the home delivery service. Transitioned right at or around the first Arab oil embargo. And along with daylight savings time and 55 miles per hour, fuel rationing was a problem back in the day. So people were looking for a reliable fuel that was abundant, that would perform. So we've been around for at least 4 decades powering vehicles. Next slide. And we're becoming trusted by a growing number of light and medium duty vehicles. Delivery, construction, you see UPS there on the lower left, Nestle Waters on the right, San Diego Metro Transit. A lot of fleets of all different types, construction, taxi, law enforcement, municipalities, even the propane industry. Universities and colleges are choosing propane as their fuel of choice. Next slide. Here's an example of a statement made by Bill Sproul, Chief Operating Officer for San Diego MTS. Propane gives us the ability to buy a vehicle that performs almost exactly like our conventional fuel technologies, and it was almost seamless for them to transition to propane. And we're hearing that story repeatedly. Next slide, please. And we're doing this through a number of partners. The 2 that were first, ROUSH CleanTech and Bluebird, were our original partners. Bluebird is Our flagship, Division Type C, actually, they were one of the first to partner with us. And then ROUSH CleanTech bringing along the 6.8 liter 3-valve. That combination has, matter of fact, Bluebird just delivered their 10,000th school bus this past July 2017 to Fulton County, Georgia. And as a result of that partnership and that growth, we've seen other companies come along, like Freightliner Custom Chassis, who manufactures cabin chassis as well as chassis for the Thomas-built school buses. And IC Bus, who is powered by the PSI technology. Greencraft, a California company, is growing. Collins Bus is the largest Type A manufacturer in the world. And Isuzu, known for their low-cab Ford vehicles. In the aftermarket, next slide, please. This is where about 68% of our business comes annually. As we're growing the OEM side of the business, it's for those of you that are not aware, we have the monofuel, our dedicated application, and the bifuel application. We can operate on both gasoline and propane, with propane being the primary fuel. And that's today accounts for 67 to 68% of our sales annually. It's cost effective. It extends the driving range. It reduces the worry about performance. And we have some excellent partners here. The two major ones are Alliance Autogas, or Blossman Services Incorporated, and ICOM North America. Recently, we've added companies like one company you may know is Westport, in the lower right-hand column. Campbell Parnell has been a growing partner for us. AGA, Incida Energy, and Yellow Star Checker Cab is operating about 900 propane-powered cabs in Las Vegas. And they are certifying their systems and making it available to for fleets of all types to purchase. So our partners have made it possible for our growth, and we are thankful for them. Next slide, please. Earlier I mentioned that certified fuel systems, and I want to take this opportunity to reiterate it, that PERC supports and promotes only EPA and CARB certified fuel systems for both our dedicated and aftermarket installations. For a complete list of the certified fuel systems, you can go to propane.com or contact me and I'll be happy to link you up. From the Class 1 Ford F-150, next slide, through the Class 7 autogas fuel systems, they can meet the needs of fleets of all type. In this particular case, I think we have the Ford 53 strip chassis with the Sara Lee body on it. Class 6, next slide, please. Beverage truck for Nestle Waters. They have purchased actually hundreds of those vehicles and are moving toward a substantial portion of their fleet operating solely on propane. Both are available in the aftermarket biofuel also. Next would be the Freightliner Custom Chassis MT45 with GM 6-liter engine. Click. Under the UPS package cars. Click. There you are. Everybody knows Brown. We have about 1,200 of these now in the U.S. operating on propane. And if you know the background of UPS, you know that they operate all technologies, all fuel technologies. And they were very complimentary of their propane and enjoy our vehicles. Also, too, you can get the PSI 8.8 liter engine, which is currently powering over 1,300 bobtails, the vehicle in the lower right-hand corner, which is the Cadillac of our industry. And it's also suitable for crane and cylinder exchange trucks for propane delivery. Next slide, please. The incentives today, if you're looking for incentive information in the 3 states we mentioned, the best place to find that is to go to the Alternative Fuels Data Center. That's afdc.energy.gov, and click on your state. And it will list out the laws as well as the incentives that are available for propane as well as all other fuels. So that's a good place to start as far as researching what's available in your states. Regarding federal incentives, recently, next slide please, recently enacted legislation reactivated the 2017 alternative fuel excise tax credit. You notice up at the top, it tells you that this is a law that's retroactive to 2017 only, so it expires December 31st, 2017. So this would apply to previous owners of propane-powered vehicles. We know that NPGA is aggressively pursuing this along with the other alt fuels, and we're hopeful that we can get that extended to 2018 and beyond. And that is, once you adjust based on energy content for fuels, that equates to about 36 cents per gallon of propane sold or purchased last year in 2017. Next slide, please. And the alternative fuel infrastructure tax credit is available, installed. It's for any equipment installed through December 31st is eligible for a credit of up to 30% of the cost, not to exceed $30,000. So if you installed alternative fuel, whether it's propane, CNG, whatever, last year, you can qualify for this particular tax credit. And with that, Catherine, I will say once again, thank you for this opportunity. I'm available for questions. Here's my contact information. That is my cell phone. Please feel free to reach out, contact me at any time with any questions, or email me. I'm available. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Catherine.
Thank you, Michael. The next presenter will be Chelsea Uphaus, the marketing manager with ROUSH CleanTech. Let me pull your screen up and then you can go ahead.
Thanks, Catherine. And thanks for having me today. I'm here to talk a little bit about propane vehicles in the class 4 through 7 market and kind of where we focused and where we've seen a lot of success going forward. So I first want to start, though, talking a little bit about ROUSH. Some of you are familiar with us and some of you are NASCAR fans, so you've probably heard of ROUSH Fenway Racing. That is one of the divisions of ROUSH. Jack ROUSH, our owner, started that back over 40 years ago now. The main division in ROUSH is ROUSH Industries, which is really our backbone. That's where we do all of our manufacturing, engineering, and design work for the big OEMs. So we work with everybody. We do a lot of behind the scenes work, which it's nice to be a part of ROUSH CleanTech where we actually talk about what we're able to do. ROUSH Performance is also one of the divisions where we do our high horsepower Mustangs and our F-150s and Raptors. So we make things go really fast in that division. Also deck them out a little bit with some body kits, and we do a lot of interior work as well. And then CleanTech, that's the division that I'm in and that we're going to talk about today. We were founded in 2010, so we are just about 8 years old now. This is the alternative fuels division. So we are focused on alternative fuel technology, and we started with propane vehicles and propane fuel systems, and we've actually expanded a little bit into some of the other fuels, but propane is really our flagship, and we feel that propane does make the most sense in many of the markets that we're going to talk through today. All of our propane systems are EPA and CARB certified, and we also maintain Ford's factory warranty. So any of the vehicles that you run on propane, you're gonna receive the same warranty you would as if it were a gasoline vehicle. Oops, I'm sorry. So I'd like to show this chart because there are a lot of different fuel options out there, and sometimes it's difficult to see where you should be going or kind of how you make your decision on which alternative fuel works best for you. So in the second column really is diesel, which is the common school bus fleet fuel right now. We are seeing a shift towards propane more, but diesel's been in use for many years. It's great, easy adoption. The infrastructure is available. You get the range that you want, and of course, it's easy for fleets to scale up or down. So that's why we've seen diesel be so successful. But as more emission standards are coming out, we're starting to take a look at different fuels, and gasoline has actually been a hit with some of the school district fleets. It checks a lot of the boxes in addition to diesel, especially if you're trying to get away from any of the diesel after treatment that you have to focus on. Gasoline is a good option for that. It's also a low upfront cost. But of course, we do feel that propane is the best option for school district fleets, for your class 4 through 7, for your vans that you're running, so even the light duty applications, because you really can implement it into your fleet easily. You're going to see the emissions benefit. It's a domestically produced fuel, which Michael mentioned, and the infrastructure is pretty easy to implement. CNG and electric are two other options that have been gaining a lot of traction and getting a lot of attention lately. CNG makes a lot of sense if you already have infrastructure in place, since that's where you see a lot of the upfront challenges is the infrastructure costs are incredibly high. With electric, that's a technology that we're really seeing to emerge and grow, and it seems like we're headed that way for the future. Right now, a lot of the implementation of electric, it's not going to offer everything that you need. Sometimes you can't get the range or you can't charge your vehicle. So there are still some stepping stones that we need to get to make electric even more mainstream. But we are here to talk about propane, and that is the majority of our business here at ROUSH. And so I wanted to talk through just some of the myths or the barriers that we've heard and talk through why it's actually not the case for propane. The first one that we hear a lot is infrastructure. We can't find anywhere to fill up our propane vehicle. And that is the case in some situations, but actually there are more than 3,500 public propane stations throughout the country. So this map here shows all of the propane stations. This is located on the AFDC website, which Michael mentioned. And what we tend to do with our customers is we work with them and we'll introduce them to a propane marketer so that they can work with that propane marketer and put infrastructure right on their location, so that they're coming back and they're parking their vehicles in their parking lot each night, and there's a propane station right there so that they can get fuel either before they leave or at the end of the day. The second myth that we hear a lot is performance, is I'm not going to get the same performance out of my propane vehicle as I would my gasoline or my diesel. So in reality, there's actually no loss of horsepower or torque with propane. The picture here is actually Jack Roush, who's our founder. His daughter, Susan Roush, races a propane drag car. So that's powered by propane right there. And she's won a title the last few years, and between her and her partner, they both run propane vehicles. They've actually both won a title, whether it's either of them, over the last 10 years. So you're still going to see the same performance that you would with propane vehicles. So there's no loss there. And the third myth is cold weather operation. So Michael mentioned that propane loves winter, and we sure do. It's very easy to operate propane in the winter. We don't have any cold starting issues. We've actually seen some of our school buses start in temperatures as low as -50 degrees Fahrenheit. You don't have to plug the buses in at night, and we've actually heard of some of our school districts parking the propane buses outside and their diesel buses inside because they have so many issues starting their diesel buses. You can also get a lot quicker cabin heat. The heater and those propane buses is going to heat up much quicker than it will on the diesel buses. So we've talked a little bit about school bus, but where are we seeing the most adoption for propane? This chart here shows some of the industries that we focus on and what platforms apply to it. So at ROUSH here, we work exclusively with Ford. And so we have the Ford E450, F450, 550, all the way up to the 750. So right now our focus is in the class 4 through 7 vehicles. And we've really found a sweet spot in the linen, food and beverage, transit market, logistics, of course, towing, government, and airports are all really great targets for propane, just because a lot of those applications come back to a specific spot each night. So anytime that there's a hub and spoke operation where the vehicles go out and then come back each night, we've really found a sweet spot for propane. This highlights a little bit of a few of the transit agencies across the country that are running them. DART up in Delaware, they have over 110 units operating there. Flint MTA, which is here in Michigan, they have about 150 E450 shuttles operating. And then Broward County in Florida has 138 units operating right now. And you can tell there that the landscape and the geography is all different for those. The climates are all different, but propane does still make sense in all of those various locations. Another one that Michael mentioned is San Diego MTS. So they're operating just over 100 of our F550 shuttle buses, and they were under strict guidelines from the city to reduce their emissions. So the first thing they did was took a look at their fleet, and they were able to significantly reduce those emissions with propane vehicles. Another major customer of ours is Nestle. They're running over 600 of our propane trucks throughout the country. They have them deployed in, oh man, probably 10 to 15 different locations throughout the country. But they're able to set up a propane station at each of those lots, at each of those areas, and they found that the propane solution, it really provides them the right option to reduce their emissions. It offers the right amount of range, and their drivers actually love driving them because they don't see any degradation in their performance. And then, of course, school districts. We have over 10,000 school buses on the road and in about 750 school districts. And one of the biggest ones is Boston Public Schools. They're running about 250 of our propane buses. And one of the great things about propane is that it is so scalable and versatile. You can put propane in one school bus in a small fleet, or you can run it in very large fleets like Boston, and they're implementing 250, I'm sorry. And then ABC Student Transportation is the contractor here in Michigan that services Detroit Public Schools. So they have about 130 of our buses in operation right now. And you can see behind that bus there, they put their own big propane tank on site. So their drivers fuel up every couple days when they leave the lot, which offers a really good option since they don't have to go looking for fuel anywhere. But that is what we recommend, is to put infrastructure right on your facility if you have the room for it. And there are many different options, which I believe Matt Lomas with McCallister is going to get into a little bit more. So I'll stick around, and if there's any questions that come up, please just let me know. But other than that, I'll turn it back to you, Catherine.
Thank you, Chelsea. The next speaker today, as Chelsea said, will be Matt Lomas. He is the Transportation Account Manager with McCallister Transportation. Let me pull your screen up. And you can go ahead, Matt.
All right, thanks, Catherine. And thank you all for calling in. As Catherine mentioned, my name is Matt with McCallister Transportation. McCallister's been the, for those that don't know, is the Bluebird school bus dealer in the state of Indiana, has been for about 10 years now. So we've got a good handle on the Bluebird product, and Bluebird specifically considers themselves to be fuel neutral. They offer different fuel lines from diesel, CNG, gas, electric, into propane. Specifically today, we're going to talk about national averages, what Bluebird has done, what ROUSH has done, and why, when it's all said and done, we see propane as being the best option for your return on your investment and for your cost of ownership of any vehicle that you can put on the ground in your fleet. So a few touch points that I'm going to go over. Again, environmental benefits, energy security of propane, which some of these might overlap with a couple of the other speakers, so I apologize for that, but we'll do my best not to spend too much time on anything everybody's already heard. Ease of switching into your fleet, and then what you can do. What next steps can you take to start moving in this direction? Do a little bit more research specifically for your fleet to see if it works. So first things first, environmental benefits. We'll try to click through this. There we go. So we kind of have our three key elements here of what makes propane a benefit for a fleet. You have your financial end of it, the environmental aspect, and the independence of having this as a fuel. So we're going to spend some time now going over the environmental benefits of that, of propane specifically. So this all kind of drills down into the actual, we'll call it the molecular compounds of the fuel. So the reason that we see diesel becoming such a headache for school fleets is the management of the after treatment systems that go onto these diesel buses. These after treatment systems are there to help these buses meet the emission standards that the EPA has set. Why propane becomes a great option is because the natural lower carbon count that the fuel has itself. So with the Ford V10 and the ROUSH system on there, we're able to attain current emissions and actual emissions coming down the pipeline next. We're meeting those currently without actually putting any after treatment to the extent that you would have on a diesel. So the maintenance costs and things like that go into these, you know, the DPF, the DEF, SCRs, all these different items that are on these buses now are becoming a major headache and cost for schools. So having that alleviated and off of a bus to go to propane seems to be a very viable option. So I don't want to spend too much time on this slide here, but just to show, as of June 7th, 2017, ROUSH CleanTech announced that they had achieved very low NOx emissions. And again, to that second bullet point there, with no extra hardware or increased variable costs. So this will kind of be touched on again here, right on this slide, which shows how we kind of compare, how 0.05 from a NOx standpoint, from an environmental effect standpoint, goes up against not only some competitors of ours, but other products that are commonly used right now. The diesel Cummins ISB is the most commonly used diesel engine right now in school buses, and that's at 0.19. So it's definitely interesting to take a look at this and see what emissions are achieved with a different kind of fuel without having to put a bunch of hardware that, again, will just become a cost factor to schools down the road. So again, this was kind of touched on earlier by Michael, I believe, which is that propane poses no harm to groundwater, surface water, or soil. Specifically with schools, you know, I visit plenty of schools around the state that have had the issue of leaks at their diesel tanks when fueling and things like that. Not an easy cleanup, usually costly for the school. You know, you're talking EPA coming out and doing testing, making sure that you didn't have anything go into groundwater. It can pose a big issue, a cost for the school, and just a headache that could be avoided if you were to go with propane. You now don't have that concern. So definitely something outside of the box there to take a look at, of things that aren't necessarily associated with the total cost of ownership of a fleet that can actually cost some dollars down the road there. So now we'll move into energy security. Again, this I won't spend too much time on this because it was touched on already, but it's important to note that the propane used in the United States right now primarily is coming from the United States, which is huge. We're not reliable or relying on foreign fuels or anything like that for us to supply our own domestic fleets with this propane. So again, 90% of the propane in the U.S. coming from the U.S., 7% of propane coming from Canada. There's a major natural gas shale actually that was found in the Northeast, as you can see on this slide, over in that Pennsylvania, Eastern Ohio area. And again, as Chelsea had mentioned earlier, propane actually has the largest refueling infrastructure publicly of any alternative fuel domestically. So important things to keep in mind when looking at this, that you know, folks are typically kind of concerned about going this route about where can I fuel my bus if I've got to take a 3-hour field trip somewhere with a bus full of, you know, football players and all this other stuff, and it's got to be idling to keep, you know, however that might work. You have plenty of options, especially in the state of Indiana, plenty of options. Fuel pricing specifically, again, because this is more of a domestic fuel, remains relatively stable, and stable as in lower than diesel as well. It kind of trends to stay under that 40% less than gasoline mark and lower than diesel. It'll kind of scale along with them in terms of go up and down a little bit here and there, but I mean, we're looking back on this chart as of 2014, stayed relatively stable and being that 40 to 50% lower than the other fuels. See if this will click over here real quick. Okay, so we're going to move on to ease of converting fleet. So a lot of the following slides here, I'm going to be gearing obviously more towards school buses and what we've seen, school districts that we've been working with, how easy it's been for them to convert, what setups they've had for their tanks, and some other things that they've done specifically for them to keep in mind for any school districts looking to make this move. So this is a nice slide. It shows you all of our fleets in the state of Indiana that have moved to propane. I'm originally from Northwest Indiana, so the weather up there is significantly different and can be significantly different than Southwestern Indiana, as we all know. So the schools up in Northwest Indiana are seeing this benefit from a cold start and your fuel economy and things like that. But it's important to know, even in the hillier areas down in southern Indiana, we're still seeing the positives and your return on your investment from your fueling costs, your maintenance costs. Maybe not so much into needing the cold weather advantages, but they're still there regardless. Obviously, it can get plenty cold in Evansville, but it's definitely a fuel that can work for multiple different types of routes, fleets, and different aspects and applications that schools can have. So We are beyond the guinea pig stage, what I'll call the experimental stage of propane with the Ford V10 and the ROUSH CleanTech system. Now with over 12,000 of these buses on the road, we're beyond the question marks and the guessing games on what national numbers are. We can do a pretty good job now of conservatively coming up with national averages and what schools are seeing in certain maintenance item savings and fuel savings and things like that. So it's been a huge success for us, and in Indiana as well. Now over 150 school buses, propane, as well as over 20 school districts. So not only being adopted by new schools, but repeat purchases of schools, getting the buses, running them for a year, and saying, you know what, these savings are real. We're seeing all the positives from our drivers, from our kids, and obviously a big factor is environmental and financially. So definitely something that's been proven and is continuing to prove itself in the school bus world. A quick map here. This is Bluebird Specific, the different fleets around the nation. Obviously, we see Texas and California doing a great job with moving forward with this as a fuel. Indiana is making its way, and as again, the Bluebird dealership, we're expecting to have Indiana get bluer and bluer as we go along here. So just a nice picture there to show that this is becoming a widespread solution for a lot of different areas, continental and up in Canada as well. Trying to click forward here, it's not letting me move forward. Catherine, I might need you to move that one forward. It doesn't look like it's letting me do it anymore here. Thank you. So the next few slides here, as I mentioned, we're going to kind of see, these are Indiana-specific schools. The MSD of Warren Township is down in Indianapolis here. The ease of converting your fleet and putting tanks in has really shown to be as simple as what we were hoping it would be. Schools going out to bids for their fuel, the providers will come in, give you the solution of, hey, this is what it'll cost for us to either do a wet fuel solution, a 1,000-gallon tank solution. We can do a tank on a trailer. So anything that the school would need to do, more than likely, we really haven't seen too many situations, if any, where the fueling provider says, I don't know if we can come up with something like that. Obviously, you're going to have some fire codes, and you're going to need to make sure that you get all your necessary paperwork and things like that done. But beyond crash barriers, cement pad, and power running to it, that should be really the only commitment made there. And then your fueling provider should be able to take care of the rest. So the rest of the slides here, again, Wayne Township, they have now 30 propane buses and have their tanks set up. Southwest Allen, obviously a little bit different of a tank. You can see they actually use a different fueling provider than the previous two. So plenty of fueling providers out there, and for the benefit of a school district, you allow the fueling providers to compete against each other and offer you up the best solution, the best price, what they'll do to help with infrastructure and all that stuff. So it's only advantageous to you to get plenty involved and see who can come up with the best solution for you. And then Avon, again, we can kind of see the difference in tank sizes, tank placement, and then a key factor is the scalability of this fuel. Obviously, we want schools to see the benefits of propane that we're talking about and want to increase their fleet size, which will mean an increase in fuel needed. So these tanks are all scalable. You can go larger, and it's very, very easy. Again, these fueling providers now are very, very helpful in making this painless for schools to go to. So definitely an easy conversion to move towards in any application that you would need there, and whatever lot space might be available. So the question now is, why convert? Plenty of reasons, but the one that we keep going back to, obviously environmental, huge. But what is on or not on these buses that is making it so much easier to work on for these shops? So first and foremost, you're looking at just the oil count with the Ford V10 compared to a standard diesel bus. You're at 7 quarts of oil as opposed to upwards of 30. Just that in and of itself is a standard preventative maintenance item that's going to save money that every school, every vehicle has to go through oil changes. So you're immediately seeing the savings there. I'm not going to touch on the next set of slides for too long, but it's just to kind of give you an idea of all of the items that actually go on to a diesel bus to allow it to meet emission standards. And actually, this isn't even all the slides that I pulled from another PowerPoint that we have, but Obviously, you can see it's pretty involved in what all goes into the diesel systems now to allow them to meet current emission standards. And again, all of these are just additional items that will then become an expense to schools, maintenance items, things that, it's just costly. It's just all around. You're looking at the bottom line financially, and you can get all of this stuff off of the bus while also having lower emissions by going to propane as a fuel, just because of its, the lower carbon count in the fuel itself. So all of those items that I show kind of fall into this chart where you can see, I would say, more national average numbers here. Again, something we can and are more than happy to drill down to specifically with a fleet that might be interested, and pull numbers on what you're spending on anything from your DEF head, your level sender, dosing pump, all the way to your EGR valve. Obviously, all things on the left column that are not available are all expense columns that you see for the Cummins ISB. So just something to keep in mind there when we're talking about why to convert over. It's greener, it's less maintenance, lower costs. You're actually getting a return on your investment, as opposed to it being, a constant depreciating asset that you're putting in your fleet. So looking at things like this almost seems like a no-brainer there. And I know Chelsea mentioned this earlier, so I won't touch too much on it. A big problem that we see schools dealing with, especially in the Midwest region, is temperature. We're talking about cold start issues with diesel. A term that we hear very often is gelling, which you see there in the parentheses at that cloud point bullet there. These issues are alleviated with the propane. It's naturally a liquid in colder temperatures. If the bus gets to a point where propane is naturally liquid, or the temperature gets to a point where propane is naturally liquid, your batteries will freeze over. There will be no school. So at really no point that you would actually have school would your buses not start up because of the weather. So that gets rid of electrical costs. Technicians having to go outside at 3 o'clock in the morning to jump buses and start buses to make sure that they're ready and warm for drivers to come in. Major things that happen on a regular basis in, the December, January, and February months in the Midwest. So again, not to spend too much time on that. And Chelsea mentioned this starts in -50. Again, at that point, your batteries are frozen. And I would hope nobody in the state of Indiana is going to school at temperatures like that. So, we see schools spending money on Webasto's, your block heaters plugging in, again, labor costs for starts, all that stuff we've touched on. But again, incurring costs that you might not actually take into consideration over the annual expenses of a transportation department that are adding up, are costing more, and can be alleviated by moving to propane as a fuel. So what next steps do I take? If this all sounds like a viable option for you and you're seeing the success that other schools are having, what next steps should you take? What I would recommend, and what Bluebird and ROUSH have developed, is what Michael had mentioned was a total cost of ownership analysis. Now, this is obviously geared more towards this Ford B10 with the ROUSH conversion. But the majority of schools in the state of Indiana that we have had go to propane have ran this analysis. It's good to show to a board, your business manager, CFO, transportation director, anybody interested in financially, why does this make sense? We get why propane makes sense environmentally. Why does it make sense financially? And this calculator takes away the national. Again, we're at a point where we can come up with some pretty solid national average numbers for propane, but we can drill specifically into what you're spending on diesel, put it into this calculator, run what we're having, and conservatively come up with what your lifetime savings for each propane bus would be. So definitely something that will help you wrap your mind around all of the little aspects, those little items, again, that go into the after treatment, your oil changes, and all this other stuff. To get an understanding of how much you could be saving per bus. So my contact information is on the last slide if there are any questions, but myself, Tyler Nohe, and Nate Kryline are the account managers here at McCallister. We're all familiar with running a total cost of ownership analysis. So more than happy to run that for anyone on the line that would be interested in seeing what kind of real world numbers you'd be looking at for savings. So that's all I have if there are no questions.
Thank you, Matt. We appreciate that. I don't see any questions right now, so we will move ahead to Jason. Jason Ebert, he is the Vice President of Fleets and Facilities with Go Riteway Transportation Group. Let me pull up your slide, and then you are good to go, Matt. Or Jason, my apologies.
Okay, so as was mentioned, I am the Vice President of Fleet and Facilities for Riteway Transportation Group. We are particularly based in the Wisconsin area. Our service vehicles within our fleet, we service about 1,200 different vehicles. School buses are bread and butter, I guess you would say. About 900 school buses in the fleet. Airport shuttles was 50. That is a little bit of an industry that's kind of taken a little bit of hit, especially in the area of Milwaukee, so we've been downsizing that, so we're around 30 now. Motor coaches, about 30 of those, 30 mini coaches. Sedan and limousine is just another piece of our puzzle up here as far as vehicles within our fleet. So as you can see, we're pretty diverse in our applications of vehicles that we have here to offer. The propane project. So first, when we got into the propane project, we looked at the return on investment, right? It has to make some dollar sense. Everybody wants to be as green as they can be and as friendly to the environment that we can be, but ultimately, it does come down to some way, shape, or form ROI. So what we found is that we could utilize a green technology and still increase our bottom line, which is a win-win when you're talking about using propane. We decided that it would be best to install our own propane refueling station. A couple of reasons for that. Locations currently available, as you've seen on the map, alternative fuel locator. There are quite a few of them across the country, but the locations that we have in our areas really didn't fit our initial what we were going to use it for, which was our airport shuttle service. And our airport shuttle service pretty much runs 24/7. So the ease of accessibility at point number 3 was kind of a big one, along with the locations they were located at. And I would encourage everybody, when you're looking at propane, it was highly encouraged to set up your own site from the other presenters, but it has to make sense for your business and how you're going to model it. But with the 24/7 needs of accessibility for refueling, what you find out there, what we found in our area is that the sites that didn't offer propane refueling were only open during normal business hours. So you can see like a 9 to 5 or 8 to 4 type access to use the refueling facilities. So for us, that just didn't fit what we were doing as far as the first application, which was our airport shuttles. The price of buying the bulk propane, that was another incentive to go in-house with the site itself. You'll find that you can buy that at a retailer just like any other fuel, but to have it on site, you're going to save quite a bit of money. Actually, we changed our size of our site. We went from a 4,000 gallon tank to a 30,000 gallon tank, and we're saving an additional 15 cents a gallon just by changing tank sizes because of the amount of fuel that we were going through. We burn currently at that 30,000 gallon site, we go through about 225,000 gallons a year, which is mostly from our airport shuttle service. And that kind of goes into the station considerations, site preparations and size. Size it accordingly to what you think it could be, not size it to what you need today. So if you think that propane is the right fit for your fleet and you could see yourself running, 80% of your fleet, which has kind of been the norm for us in our school bus side of things, size it so that it's set going forward, not what you need today. The rules and regulations, a lot of that set as you go across and look at it across the country at the state level. I know that here in Wisconsin, the rules, pretty much what the state says is what goes, but you will run into municipalities as far as some of those bollard posts that you've seen earlier in the slides from Matt, or barricades. You've seen the different ones. Some of them had concrete barriers, some of them had the bollard steel posts, some of them had some plastic up there. That's all going to vary a little bit by a municipality as well as the state level. So if you're really considering putting a station in, reach out and find out what the regulations are in your particular area, because they will vary. Training requirements, nobody really touched a whole lot on this, but there is a OSHA training requirement for refueling stations. We had 3 people certified on staff that can train our people to refuel their vehicles, and that's just a refresher that we try to have on a quarterly basis with those drivers so that they understand the refueling and how it operates. It isn't a whole lot different than refueling a gasoline vehicle or a diesel vehicle, but there is some additional training requirements for that when you're refueling with a propane vehicle. You do need some PPE. It's recommended. I was chuckling a little bit. They had the picture of the officer that was refueling his vehicle with a nozzle for propane, but with no PPE on, which is usually a no-no there. You want to have a set of gloves on when you're refueling a vehicle so that you don't end up getting a burn in case something did come back as far as propane, because it's quite cold. Maintenance factors. What we found is, and this was a learning curve for us, the propane sites in general, they tell you that the pumps themselves need to be rebuilt at about 200,000 gallons. So for us, when we're pushing 225 a year, our pumps get rebuilt once a year. And if you have high demands on when that fuel has to be available for you, I would highly recommend looking at a redundant system, which is what we did. We have two refueling stations on that site, and both of them act completely separate from the other. So if one side's down for the pump being rebuilt for its annual maintenance, the other side is up, because that could be an issue if you had, like I said, a high demand as far as when you have to fuel your vehicles in frequency, and you don't have the time where you can actually shut your site down. So take that into consideration as well. Is the site itself, the pumps themselves on those sites will need an annual maintenance, which is, I guess I would say that's probably something that people don't think about. We don't have it because we also have gasoline and diesel on our sites as well for our school buses, and that's something that we didn't anticipate going into the propane thing. The record keeping, think about how you're going to track that fuel. I highly recommend an auto attendant if you really need some detailed information. There's a lot of them out there that work with gas and diesel. We've been working with Fuel Master. It's kind of been our go-to recently because it integrates all together. So we actually have propane, diesel, and gas all through the same auto attendant and stored in the same database. But if you need some accurate record keeping, especially when you're talking about the rebates that come and go as far as tax incentives, the 50-cent tax credit for the fuel that's out there for 2017 is not in place for 18 at this point. Those records with your usages would be very beneficial. So keep that in consideration. An auto attendant makes things work pretty slick. Vehicle implementation, like I mentioned, we did the airport shuttle division first. We really looked hard at fuel economy. Industry standard kind of would tell you that it was told 10% compared drop off to gasoline. We were seeing closer to 15 to 20 drop off, and that was in a ROUSH setup, ROUSH CleanTech. We worked pretty close with them when we first started out. We actually got certified through ROUSH to do our own installs. But we put their system on Ford E350 vans on the 5.4 engine, and we were seeing about a 15 to 20% drop off in fuel economy. and that was average across 13 million miles. So we average about 1 million miles a year on our airport shuttle service. So we have quite a bit of data to back that up. Repairs and maintenance, the oil change intervals, they will tell you that the oil change intervals can be stretched a little bit because you're running a cleaner fuel. However, I caution you when you look at that, you really have to take into account propane does burn hotter than some of the fuels that are out there in a conventional setting. So the oil is going to get warmer as well. So look at where that oil is breaking down. And what we did is we did an oil analysis. We sent our oil out and started looking at it at 4,000 miles, 5,000 miles. And we determined that, we could have probably went out to 7,000, 8,000 miles on a standard 5,000 mile oil change on a gasoline vehicle comparable. But we felt that 6,000 miles we were in that safe zone where the oil started to break down a little bit in regards to the heat that it was seeing. Not so much that it was getting dirty, but it was the heat that was generated from burning the propane in the vehicle itself. Increased cost of maintenance. We really haven't seen a whole lot of increased cost of maintenance in the vehicles themselves. The ROUSH system on the 5.4, we did see quite a bit of fuel pump failures with that system. I know they were on Gen 3, 4 of the fuel pump. It had been an issue. That was kind of a pain to change because you had to drop the whole tank on those vehicles to get the pump out. I think they've made some advancements in that now. I know the Bluebird buses that we have that run the propanes, they have basically you can get at it from the top of the tank inside the bus. There's a cut in the floor and a window where you can get at it if you had to. We really haven't seen them on the school buses, but on the airport shuttles, where we were running an average 100,000 miles a year on those vehicles, we were seeing fuel pumps fail. Ease of use, employees, it is pretty similar to just gasoline fueling. So switching over, getting people used to it was pretty comparable. We switched over from the screw-on type fitting on our propane sites to our Quick Connect Euro type is what they call it today. That was a new thing to the industry a few years ago. The screw type fittings on the propane tanks, what we found was that they were failing. The threads would fail over time and we'd have to replace them. But on the Euro connection, the Quick Connect has been more robust for us. So that's been a positive change. So I would highly recommend the Quick Connect versus the screw-on type fitting that used to be out there in the industry. And the cost of fuel, I put down 33% less than gasoline. That's probably a little bit different now that we got that larger tank in there. We're probably closer to 50% less than gasoline. But I wouldn't go into this figuring that you were going to save a bunch of money on fuel. Your big savings is maintenance, as it was kind of alluded to before by Matt, and that TCO. That total cost of ownership, we did that analysis on our school buses when we got into that area of the fleet. But the airport shuttle relaunched. This was kind of touched on a little bit too. There are other systems out there. There's some biofuel systems that use propane as their primary fuel. We actually went to that. ROUSH, as was alluded to before, has kind of been focused in the school bus, medium duty to heavy duty type applications, and they ultimately dropped their systems for the transits at this point. There's no offering out there, so we were kind of trying to find a new system that we could put in our airport shuttle vehicles, and we came across the PRIN system. And that system there is a biofuel system, and that vehicle starts on gasoline, but as soon as it's started, it will switch over to propane and run on propane until it runs out of propane, and it will automatically switch itself over to gasoline, which we gained a lot of flexibility and range with that system, and has actually worked out quite well for us. We're at about 700 miles of range on a given vehicle, which is kind of unheard of. We'll never put that kind of range on between the gas and propane that the vehicle carries. We didn't lose any luggage capacity, which is always a concern when you're dealing with an application like airport shuttle. You don't want to lose that luggage area for those passengers on the vehicles. So the tank is underneath with spare tire used to be on those vehicles, which we don't typically change spare tires on the road, so it wasn't a big change for us. But the flexibility and range, we're able to change those out with vehicles that aren't at a propane station that primarily run on gasoline throughout the year, and we can rotate those vehicles down for maintenance and not have an extended vehicle fleet, because we have to have set aside gasoline vehicles to rotate down to take the place of the gasoline vehicles that need service. So since I can run on either fuel, propane, or gasoline, if I don't have a propane station, I can run it on gasoline until I can get to a propane station. So it's worked out really nice. And we've seen that. You'd think that, well, the drivers will just won't fill up the propane. They'll just use the gasoline. We haven't seen that. We were all prepared that, you know, drivers are just going to use the gasoline. We're going to have talks, and we haven't seen a drop off in them using the propane side of those vehicles. They have maintained, and that goes to show that refueling with a propane station versus gasoline they're pretty comparable. There's not a big change, so the ease of refueling those vehicles is a positive thing. Items to consider when you're looking at systems, it was mentioned a few times, make sure you're getting an EPA certified system. You've got to find one that has its certification. Ask for that certification up front, especially if you're looking for any kind of funds out there that may be available for grants. Trust but verify. You always want to look at the numbers, but you want to verify them yourself. We did that with our airport shuttle. We started out with 10. We increased the fleet to 31. And then really consider self-installing. Us at Go Riteway, you know, one of my big philosophies is to have our technicians know exactly how the whole system works. And the way we do that is they put them in. You know, that you can start from the ground up and look at the whole system as a whole. And we get, like I said, we got certified from ROUSH, we got certified from PRINS to put those systems in. But if you have a big enough fleet and you have your own mechanics, really consider doing self-installs and getting trained on how to do that, because that will help you out in the future for troubleshooting them. Because they do break just like any other vehicle that you have out there. Gasoline, propane, diesel, they all going to have maintenance at some point or another. The school bus implementation side of things, you know, in the initial analysis, the cost of diesel versus the propane unit. The propane unit typically runs, you know, $4,000 to $6,000 more than a diesel vehicle, even with all those emissions things not on there, which is always mind-boggling to me. But they charge more for a propane unit than they do for a diesel. And the estimated fuel economy drop-off initially when we got into it was 30%. I know I seen on Matt's slides it was like 36%. We were seeing 40 to 50% drop-off initially on our propane buses to our diesels. So that's why I say I wouldn't get too hung up on saving your money on the fuel side. You're really going to make it up on the maintenance. We did have some changes in the programming of our propane buses. We were seeing that 40-50% drop off in fuel economy. So what we did is, you know, they came out and recalibrated those torque patterns. Like was mentioned before by Chelsea, there really isn't a drop off in torque or performance in the vehicle, but we were having school buses that would take off like jackrabbits. And you give that kind of power to a school bus driver, and you can talk to them all you want it, but if it's got it in the gas pedal, they're going to use it. So we ended up reprogramming our buses with a different torque pattern, which increased fuel economy, which acted, you know, kind of like a training to get the drivers to be more fuel conscientious on our side, which did help a little bit. So we're probably closer to that 36 number that was mentioned before. But we were a 40-50% drop off in that fuel economy, and then you're not making it on the fuel at all. You really make it on the maintenance. The DEF was mentioned, the oil and filter, the other unknown items. You know, we see a change out of about 1.5 turbos per life cycle of a diesel bus compared to a propane bus where you don't have one. Your EGR cooler, 1.5 again. Your DPF cleaning, you're probably going to clean that out once, if not twice, in the lifespan of a school bus, because it does a lot of idling just by the nature of what it's doing on some of its routes. So you do save it in that maintenance item. The fuel, you might be, I would consider it cost neutral on the cost itself from our experiences, but the difference is in the maintenance. I really truly think that's where you're going to make it up. So if propane seems to be a fit for you and you're getting frustrated with the maintenance costs, and maybe it's the technicians that are out there. I know we run into problems trying to find qualified technicians to work on diesel vehicles. That seems to be a growing trend. So maintenance is a big item where you can make your money back. Other items to consider, I mentioned the range issues. Make sure you consider those. Supply chain for parts. One thing you will have is that propane parts for those systems aren't as readily available as other parts that are out there for gasoline vehicles. You can't just go down to Napa down the street and get your fuel pump for a ROUSH propane kit. So make sure your inventory levels are good. Make sure you have a good relationship with your school bus vendor, or your dealer in the area, or ROUSH Direct if you're going that route. Certified dealers for outside repairs. We ran into this problem recently. Unfortunately, probably have to go away. We've had to go away from the Bluebird school bus in our area because of our problems trying to find a Ford medium-duty vendor that can work on warranty repairs on our buses. IC is more prevalent in our area of the state, and the IC dealers are a little easier to get in and get them serviced for. So Bluebird's been a good system, but when we've had warranty coverage issues, especially on the Ford side, with the engine itself, we've had problems trying to get the vehicles repaired on a timely fashion. So I would encourage you to take a good look at what type of dealers you have around you. Are you prevalent with IC? Are you prevalent with Bluebird? And make an educated decision in that regards to which one you go with. I think both of them are good options. We have 11 of the IC buses. We have 70 or 60 of the Bluebird chassis in our fleet currently. So we have good experience with both of them. Shop configurations for in-house repairs, pretty limited, but you can't have any pits. So if you're a place that has pits, propane may not be the right fit for that type of application unless you're going to service them somewhere else. Driver behavior, like I mentioned, that was, you give them that power in that vehicle, they're going to take off like jackrabbits. So we made some changes on how they were programmed and how they perform to kind of ratchet those down a little bit. Educate your customers on what effects they will have to when you service them. School districts want to hear the good things that the green technology will provide for them. So promote it with them. Encourage you to get them out there and get them educated as well. And once again, just an application fit. Propane may not be the right fit for you. There's a lot of good alternative fuels. I know this is a propane webinar. I don't have any knocks against CNG. It has its places. I don't have any knocks against electrical. I have electric charged vehicles. They have their places as well. But propane's been a good fit for us in both the airport shuttle and the school bus industries. That's all I got.
Thank you, Jason. Appreciate it. I do have one question, but if anybody has additional questions, please type them in the question box. And this is a general question. What would you recommend between buying new vehicles as opposed to converting the diesel or gas that you already have?
Well, I can tell you on when the airport shuttle vehicles, when we first got into it, They will tell you that you need the upfit package for the propane. I did reach out to ROUSH originally when I heard about that, and we ended up buying used Ford E350 vans with the standard 5.4 engine in them, and knowing where our return for how many miles we were going to get per year out of those vehicles, we took the risk knowing that there was probably a 5% chance of increased failure rate on the engine itself. And I don't think we lost a single engine, and we put 500,000 miles on each and every one of them. So I think both would work. I think you've got to look at the how long you're going to run that vehicle for. If you're going to run it on 100,000, 150, probably makes more sense to go with a new vehicle set up that way. If you're going to try to get 500,000 miles in 5 years out of a vehicle, maybe it makes sense to go with a used vehicle because warranties are going to be a big deal at 500,000. So we went both ways. Our school buses were new. They came with the kits on them. The Ford Transit, we just bought new ones. We converted them with the Prince. And then the E350s, we bought used vehicles and converted those as well. So we've had experience with all three and had good success. So I think it goes back to looking at your model and your application on mileage.
Awesome. Yes, and you are. Oh, go ahead.
This is Michael Taylor from PERC. That was a great answer to the question. I would like to toss back in here, though, and say that regardless of whether you do it from the OEM new or the aftermarket conversion, go back to that point of making sure it's a certified system. It either has to be EPA and or CARB certified, depending on the state in which you're operating. That would be the first thing. And then the second thing, there are no propane conversions available for diesel engines today. They're only for gasoline. So you cannot convert a diesel to propane. Certified, let me put it that way.
Yeah, I'd make sure.
Okay.
I'd agree with that. Make sure you've got that EPA certification or certificate before you do anything.
And if you need someone to help you find it, contact me. We have a list of all the systems out there. So be happy to help you out there. Thanks, Catherine.
Perfect. Thank you, guys. And I know Jason kind of mentioned on this, but if you already have, CNG or electric in your fleet, could you still consider propane options in either a different department or even within the same department?
I think it's worth looking at propane in that same department. Now we have a few hybrid electric vehicles in our school bus fleet. We tried that route. That payoff isn't quite there yet. If you ask the industry and school bus, that electric school bus is probably about 3 to 5 years out for target where that's going to make some sense. So you could fit propane into those fleets very easily. We have a Volt in our black car division that we have, and then we have the airport shuttle vans too. So I think you can have multiple platforms on types of fuels that you're using without an issue.
Awesome, thank you. And then are there any trainings available for fleets who plan on switching to propane?
This is Chelsea with ROUSH. Yeah, we offer training for anybody who's going to be converting over to our propane system. We also do web-based training, and we do in-person as well.
And Catherine, this is Michael Taylor again. I would throw in there, ROUSH does a fantastic job of training. All our other partners, PSI, IC Bus, Thomas, even the guys in the aftermarket, Alliance Autogas, ICOM North America, all have very good training programs for their customers. And PERC also has partnered with the National Alternative Fuels Training Consortium. And we do have propane autogas technician training classes. scheduled for 2018 around the country. So you can check on that NAFTC website or contact me and I'll get that information for you. So training is readily available.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Michael. I don't see any additional questions. Do any of the speakers have any final comments?
None for me, but thanks for having me.
Thank you, Chelsea. All right. If everybody is done, I will go ahead and wrap this up. Again, this webinar has been recorded and will be available to view on our website. Thank you again to our speakers. We really appreciate you taking time out to be a part of this. And thanks again on behalf of our Lake Michigan Consortium. And we look forward to seeing everybody at our 2018 Green Drives event on May 17th. It'll be at the NIU Naperville Conference Center. And that information is available on our websites as well. And please feel free to reach out to any of our speakers. They are great to work with and they will help out with any way that they can. Thank you, everybody, and have a great day.